If you've spent any time at all trying to get your head around the housing crisis, you know how quickly it all becomes, well, overwhelming. It's this whole morass of green belts, infrastructure, politics, and the big solutions you always hear about. They involve huge legislative reform.
Right. And those take years.
Not months, but years. Just to grind into life, it can feel completely stuck.
And that feeling of paralysis,
Uh,
the sense that any real change is a decade away, that's exactly what we wanted to tackle today.
yeah.
We went through your sources with a very specific mission.
Which was?
Is there anything the UK system could be doing right now, today, using only existing laws, existing powers, to make a real significant dent in this crisis while we wait for those big changes?
And the answer, which we pulled straight from the sources, is, well, it's surprisingly optimistic, isn't it?
It is.
Because the blockage, it turns out, isn't mainly physical capacity. It's not a lack of land, and it's not even a total lack of planning approvals.
Precisely. The core finding across these analyses is that the capacity is latent. It's locked up, not by physical limits, but by structural incentives. We have enough dead housing capacity to address a massive chunk of the crisis.
And when you say dead capacity, you mean?
Homes that are already approved or even already built, but are just do nothing.
Yeah.
Enough to make a difference before anyone pours a single new foundation. This deep dive is about quantifying that dormant supply and figuring out the simple legal levers to wake it up.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's look at the numbers. Where exactly is all this supply hiding? And I guess, why is the system just letting it sit there? Before we get to the actual housing stock, we have to talk about the political inertia. Because really, that seems to be the root cause of this policy freeze. The sources describe it incredibly well. They call it a Mexican standoff.
It's a perfect analogy, actually. It just captures that paralyzing dynamic so well. Everyone agrees the crisis is urgent, that it requires radical action.
Sure, build more homes, change tax law, overhaul planning.
All of that. But every potential first step feels politically risky, especially at a local level. If a council moves aggressively to, say, force a builder's hand, they risk backlash, legal challenges.
Accusations of overreach.
Exactly.
So who is in this standoff? Is it councils versus developers? Central government versus local?
It's often all of the above. Developers wait because, as we'll see, the market rewards patience. Local councils wait because they're afraid of being the first to try some controversial scheme that might fail.
And central government?
Well, central government waits because housing is a political minefield, so you get this endless string of sensible-sounding actions.
Reviews, consultations, announcements.
That all add up to one thing.
Yeah.
Delay. Waiting becomes the safest political move for everyone.
So this system is almost incentivized to fail, or at least to be completely frozen.
That's the painful reality of it. But the moment you strip away the slogans and, the political posturing, many of the immediate solutions are purely administrative. They aren't these huge, radical departures.
It's about using the tools you already have.
Yes. The key realization is that there's enough existing capacity to really impact demand before new construction even enters the discussion. If we just focus on activation, the scale of the problem shifts immediately.
Right. Let's nail down the numbers on that. Let's start with the most visible source of this unused stock, homes that already exist but are just standing empty.
Okay, so when we talk about empty homes, we need to be a bit specific. The official standard defines an empty home as one that's been vacant for 6 months or more.
And across England, what does that number look like?
The total figure hovers around 670,000.
That is a colossal number, but I assume a big chunk of that is just normal market churn, people buying, selling, renovating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You always need a certain level of churn for the market to function properly. But the critical figure, the one that represents housing stock that's truly doing nothing, is the long-term vacant homes.
So empty for longer than 6 months.
A year or more. Often properties that need little to no work to be habitable. And that figure stands consistently at between 250,000 and 300,000.
Wow. So that's about 3 to 4% of the entire housing stock, just inert.
Yeah. And to really drive home the impact of that number, you have to contrast it with the immediate demand.
Let's do that.
Well, you compare that, say, 300,000 figure to the local authority waiting lists. That's about 1.2 million households.
Okay.
Or look at the estimated 800,000 overcrowded households. Now, those empty homes alone wouldn't solve everything, of course not. But the sources show the incredible power of activation.
What do they mean by that?
Reactivating even half of those long-term empty homes covers an entire year's net housing requirement for the country. And crucially, it does it now. No concrete needed. No planning battles.
That's a powerful point. Immediate relief versus some 10-year plan. Okay, let's move to the second source of this latent supply, the one that's, well, quieter, but often even bigger.
hmm
We're talking about homes that have been granted planning permission but have just never been built.
And this is where the numbers get truly staggering. The best estimates, they consistently show this huge backlog of permissions. We're talking somewhere between 1.1 and 1.4 million homes with planning permission in place across the UK.
So planning has already said yes. The political hurdle for construction has, in theory, been cleared. What volume of that is just sitting stagnant?
Of that total, about 600,000 to 700,000 permitted homes aren't yet built. And within that number, about 300,000 to 400,000 are identified as properly stalled or deliberately slow-build sites.
Which is what in terms of delivery?
It's roughly 2 years' worth of approved housing delivery, just sitting there in digital form on a server somewhere.
So if you total that up,
Mm.
the long-term empty homes in these permission but unbuilt ones, you get to a figure of what, 900,000 to a million homes?
Let's just pause on that for a second. 1 million homes.
Yeah.
I mean, to put that in perspective, that is roughly the equivalent of the entire housing stock of Birmingham and Manchester combined.
Good grief.
That's the scale of the immediate, non-hypothetical supply we're talking about. It's either already built or it's already fully approved.
So if the crisis is a lack of supply, we're sitting on a million units of it. Which brings us to the next bit. The mechanics of hoarding permission. If permission's been granted, why would a developer consciously choose not to build?
Well, because the planning hurdle has been cleared. The issue from that point on is purely economic. The current system offers these really powerful, rational incentives for stagnation.
Wait, is this just what people call land banking? We hear that phrase all the time.
The sources suggest that land banking actually undersells it. It's more accurately the hoarding of permission. A piece of land with planning permission is instantly more valuable. That permission itself becomes a financial asset you can sit on.
Okay, so can you lay out the specific incentives? What makes waiting financially smarter than building?
Absolutely. The sources point to a few key drivers. First, developers often phase their developments specifically to protect local sale prices.
Right, if you flood the market, prices might dip. It hurts your margin.
Exactly. But second, and this is often more powerful, the land value itself frequently rises faster than the net margin you'd make on the build.
What does that mean exactly?
Okay, so imagine you hold land for 300 homes. You could build them all now and make, say, a 15% margin. Or you could strategically hold back half of those for 3 years. And if local land prices appreciate by 10–15% a year,
That appreciation often delivers a better return than the actual profit from building.
a better and, crucially, a safer return. Waiting holds what economists call option value. It gives the developer maximum flexibility while their asset just appreciates passively.
So from inside the system, waiting isn't malicious at all. It's a perfectly sensible financial choice. The system actually rewards sitting still.
That is the critical insight. It's so important to understand this isn't about bad actors. It's about incentives lining up in completely the wrong way. If supply stays tight, prices hold up, land appreciates, and risk stays low. Scarcity, which is terrible for the public, becomes an inherent part of the business model.
So you have to change the rules of the game.
You have to change the economics so that building becomes financially smarter than waiting.
This all sounds like a pretty fundamental flaw in the UK market, but is this problem unique to us? Or have other countries faced this and actually figured out a way to break that standoff?
Oh, it is absolutely not unique. And other countries have implemented really targeted solutions, often quietly, without needing these massive overhauls. They just made waiting expensive.
Okay, give us some concrete examples of that. How do they actually change that payoff matrix?
Let's look at France first, on empty homes. In high-demand cities, France applies specific vacancy taxes, and the rate is often progressive.
Meaning the longer it's empty, the more you pay.
Exactly. It instantly changes the financial calculation for the owner. Holding it empty becomes an active financial drain, not just a missed opportunity. Germany does something similar. It taxes long-term vacant property much more aggressively than we do.
Okay, so that would address the 300,000 long-term empty homes. What about accelerating the build-out, tackling that 600,000 plus unbuilt supply?
For that, you look at a place like Singapore. When a developer gets planning permission there, they also get binding development obligations. That permit isn't some permanent asset you can sit on forever.
It's a temporary license to get on with it.
It is. If you miss the deadlines for starting and completing the work, the penalties are severe. You might forfeit a bond, face a massive tax liability. It instantly eliminates that option value benefit we were just talking about.
The lesson seems to be universal then. When waiting stops being rewarded, things start moving.
And what's fascinating here is that the cost of not moving is already huge. The UK is currently spending tens of billions every year dealing with the consequences of the shortage.
We're paying for the failure of the market.
In a way, yes, we are.
And when we say consequences, we mean these huge financial drains like housing benefit payments, the astronomical costs of temporary accommodation, homelessness services.
And the lost economic productivity from people who can't live near where they work.
Exactly. So the return on investment for reactivating this existing stock is immediate and substantial. It costs less than creating new infrastructure, it delivers faster, and it reduces pressure on the social system.
So this isn't a choice between spend new money or do nothing.
It's a choice to spend differently now and save a lot more later.
Okay, so if we accept the premise that we need to use existing tools to change this payoff matrix, what are the concrete, non-dramatic steps the sources suggest could be taken right now to shift momentum?
The recommendations really focus on using existing powers more deliberately. First, targeted empty homes programs in high-demand areas. Councils already have powers to levy taxes and compel sales, but they need the central backing and funding to pursue them aggressively.
And that would directly target those, what, 250,000 to 300,000 long-term vacant properties?
Yes. Second, imposing time-limited development conditions on existing permissions. A bit like the Singapore model. We have the legal mechanism to impose conditions, we just need to use them consistently to enforce deadlines on those 600,000 plus unbuilt homes.
Right. If you have permission, you have a deadline to start, or you lose the advantage of that approval.
And what about funding this initial push for activation?
Third, piloting housing bond issuance at a modest scale. This just uses local authority borrowing power to fund direct intervention buying of stalled sites or financing refurbishment schemes at lower rates than private developers can get.
And finally, I suppose, a direct public sector intervention rather than just waiting for years for the current landholder to move.
Public build-to-rent schemes on those stalled sites. Look, these actions are not a replacement for massive long-term policy reform, but they are concrete moves you can execute while waiting.
So the system isn't frozen in that standoff.
Exactly. This isn't about rewriting the Constitution. It's about choosing to use the tools that are already sitting in the drawer. If we connect this all to the bigger picture for you, the sources provide this shared evidence-based understanding that the capacity up to 1 million homes, it's already there. The blockage is entirely structural, and the risk of continuing this political paralysis is just fiscally enormous.
And that's the core takeaway, really. The crisis isn't due to a fundamental lack of planning approvals or a lack of physical land. It's down to an economic model where waiting is often the only sensible choice for those holding the assets. The immediate solution involves using existing tools to change that payoff matrix so that building or using what we have becomes the normal, financially smart choice again.
This deep dive really shows that we can find the capacity to address the crisis much faster than we think. We just need to activate the supply that is already there.
So here's something for you to consider. Given that the UK already spends tens of billions annually mitigating the effects of this housing shortage, essentially paying for failure through housing benefit, temporary accommodation, and so on, what incentive shift, using only existing legal powers, offers the quickest, cleanest return on investment? Would it be a steep, progressive vacancy tax? Or would it be firm, use it or lose it deadlines on existing planning permission? It raises an important question for you to explore as you consider the real levers of policy.